95% of generative AI deployments yield no measurable return. That's what a recently published MIT report titled The Gen AI Divide State of AI in Business 2025 report said.
So essentially, is this MIT fear mongering? Is that like Ivy League fear mongering? Is MIT Ivy? I don't know. I don't
I
know. But
mean,
that feels like one of those headlines where you just throw something out into the group chat and you're like, everyone's going to jump on this.
and then you slowly just like back out. Or that Bart Simpson like GIF.
Yeah, the
He's just
Homer
like,
Simpsons where he's like,
100%. But luckily today we're going to talk about what small businesses can learn from this because trust me, I think we have a lot we can learn, and also what small business leaders can do about it.
I know. I hope we remember to include everything from our prep session because I feel like we went to town on this, guys. So I'm excited about this episode.
I can't wait. Welcome to the Managed Chaos podcast, where we give you the startup business rundown in less time than it takes for you to get to work. I'm Rachel Anderson.
And I'm Katrina Purcell.
And today we are going to talk about a news article that just came out last month, and we're going to dive right in because it is juicy. So we're going to put the full report in the notes so that anybody can read it, or you can Google the MIT AI report. I'm sure it will still be at the top of your feed. But we're going to break this down because it may not say entirely what it appears. So before
I will say, Rachel, one of the things when we were prepping for this episode and I Googled it, you know what comes up first is like the Financial Times article about it, this article about it. It's almost like the people who are taking MIT's research and deciding to expound upon it are actually gaining more traction. So hi, guys. Welcome to this episode you found when Googling MIT's article about generative AI.
We, too, are trying to get more attention from the article. No, it's really funny. That actually is a really good point. Like this, I think that there's a lot of information in this report that people can use in a lot of different ways. And I think throwing out that headline without a lot of context can be a little bit true and a little bit misleading. And so I wanted to just level set for a second with, like, in general, as you've been talking to small businesses and working with clients and all that kind of stuff, where do you see, like, what do you see the state of things right now with smaller businesses using AI? Like, what does that look like?
So I've actually been encouraged by the recent AI activity. So I think originally I found some level of frustration where it seemed like small businesses were thinking they were going to get AI to do things that maybe they didn't have documented or that they didn't necessarily have a process for, and they thought, oh, AI will just fix that. And now what I'm seeing is that there's actually this desire to truly understand. And I think more so really this reckoning that AI is kind of like an intern in some cases, especially if you're expecting it to do tasks. It needs to be trained and there needs to be an official process. There needs to be something that the AI can leverage. Right? It's not going to build something from scratch. And I think one of the coolest things I've seen is an organization I was working with that was having some really complicated challenges around decision making. And so there were points within their organization, which was a multi-tiered organization, where people didn't know, did they own the decision or did they have to kind of put it up the flagpole, right? And so what we were able to build was an actual governance framework of what decisions could be made at each level. And that included some leeway of, okay, if the budget is between X and Y, if it has this much relational, ability to impact our reputation, there were different things, right, within this governance model. And we built it into a custom gem in Gemini and allowed their team to then query it. I am this level. I'm trying to make this decision. What are my next steps? And it's almost like a confidant, right? Like a helpful person that could then say, you, friend, have the authority to make this decision. Or, hey, by the way, these are the 3 things that you need, and you need to run this up the flagpole to your manager. And so it just helped really where there was a blocker within their organization, and it helped them work through that.
That's great. Yeah, I think that's a really good example of kind of what we're seeing slowly trickle in, right? People are kind of figuring out what the solutions are that they can kind of use and things like that. I still see a lot of businesses getting tripped up between using AI and using automation. And really still trying to figure out which is appropriate when, and even as they build their solutions. And this is going to lead us straight into the report too, I think a lot of historical, that's not a word, historical? Now I'm convincing myself it is a word. Anyway, some of these more like long range companies that have been around a long time are having a more difficult time truly adopting what AI is meant to
Mhm.
be. And then small businesses popping up that are truly just fully built AI. And so I think there's this like interesting mix of, are we really in the AI world or are we still in the automation world that's kind of getting duked out as people figure out, okay, well, what does this mean for my business? What does this mean for me as an employee?
Right.
And that's where I think the details of this report really matter, which you and I talked about. So I kind of think we should just give a few caveats to what we saw in the report so that we can make sure that if you're listening to this, you know where the data is coming from and what's really being said. So the first thing is that in the report, it did say that 95% of generative AI pilot projects fail to produce measurable return on profit and loss statements. So the clarification here that I think is important is that these are new initiatives. These aren't businesses that are starting from AI.
Mhm.
This is like a new project within a historical business. Also, this isn't necessarily a new thing for businesses at large. A lot of times, new projects need a lot of time to ramp up and gain that profit and loss statement line item. One thing you pointed out, Katrina, too, is that this is largely enterprise.
Well, and they're largely pilot programs, right? And if you think about it, what is the old adage is like 90% of startups fail, right? And
Right.
so if 95% of your pilot projects fail, I mean, that's innovation. You don't expect everything to hit. That's not if it did, we'd all be winning the lottery and we'd all be on a beach in Costa Rica. We wouldn't be here.
Yes. Totally.
But the other thing which you've mentioned, and I just want to underscore, is that it really is the giants, right? The behemoths that have been around for a long time that are even doing a lot of these pilots. And those ships are a lot harder to turn. And we've seen this in other points in time, right? We saw this at the dot-com bubble, right? We've seen this with companies like Blockbuster and Kodak, right? Companies that sort of attempted to, be like, I'm testing my waters of this change, but I
Yeah.
don't really believe that Netflix is going to take off. And then, like, here we are, right? Where's your Blockbuster card? So, I think these big companies like Meta, Google, right? They have to be on board, because if they're not, the times are going to change without them. But just because they're on board doesn't necessarily mean that they're as nimble as they can be to truly take advantage of things, right? And they've got a lot more data, they've got a lot more teams and people and regulatory requirements to really play with and be in a sandbox that is, truly sort of, let's see what it does. It's much more like, let's see how this helps the business.
Yeah, absolutely. And adding on to that, AI is really complicated to make it work well, right? Just like any new fancy thing. So companies that start from scratch with AI baked into the fabric are going to have a much easier time building infrastructure around AI because it is in fact the foundation it's built on. Versus these big companies, to your point, potential connection is a every connection is a point of potential failure, as they like to
Right.
say in the engineering side of the world. And that is ever so true here, right? So these bigger companies that have all these complicated processes or lots of different tech stack in motion at any given moment, you're going to have a lot heavier of a lift to not just get it connected, get your customers to buy it, make sure that it's bug free to then scale and grow and change, even to innovate. And so that's where, I think this report is really fascinating. Yeah, because everyone just was like, oh my gosh, it's going to make us billions of dollars. It'll just change everything overnight. And it kind of has for the individual, which we'll talk about in a second, but it kind of hasn't for businesses because it's like moving a speeding train, right? You just can't do that fast.
Yeah, and I think it's also, to me, it's less even about the adoption curve and much more about sort of the transformation curve. Because this is really more about transforming how we think about work and how we approach it. And I love that theory, Rachel, that you mentioned of like, oh, it's going to be so much, here, right? Because the thought originally was we could fire our team and have AI agents, right? We don't have to deal with people anymore.
Mhm.
When in reality, the AI agents in some cases are going to be more difficult to teach and more difficult to upkeep than your team. Right. And so
Yeah.
I think it's sort of this like pendulum is kind of swinging, and it was swinging a little wildly. Right. There's going to be mass layoffs. Everyone's going to be replaced with AI. Uh, And now we're seeing, okay, wait a minute. No, it's sort of AI is going to help us, with some of these tasks that we didn't want to do in the first place, or it's going to help us to take, one of my clients does such a great job of this, where they take like 3 months of research, right, that would have
Mhm.
taken them forever to get through, and they throw it in their custom AI instance, and it's able to kind of parse through it. Is it always right? No, you have to check it, right? It is
Right.
something that's going to be hallucinating potentially, or finding fake law cases, things like
Right.
that, depending on which one you're using. But the thing from the article that really spoke to me is that a lot of these enterprises are failing partially because they want their own. They
Yes.
don't want to buy something else. And so they've decided within their four walls, for either data security reasons, for countless
Mhm.
reasons, that they
Mhm.
think they can build it better. And so they're taking these open models and they're saying, we don't care about that. We're actually going to build something internally. And the amount of firepower that it takes to actually create that from scratch, and even if you're using something that is open, but then you're turning it into your own proprietary, there's so much effort there and so much money that needs to be sunk into that. And this is just a funny thing. Like, my favorite part is when they post the job descriptions and they're like, you must have 6 years of experience dealing with open AI. And it's like, it hasn't even been, like, where are you supposed to hire these engineers, let alone how much do they cost? Because they were training on something that didn't even exist. But so, I think there's value in, as you said, focusing on solving a problem, focusing on sort of being AI first, or having it being an integral part, not just an add on, and not just something flashy that you've done because you're like, oh, this will get me, revenue, or this will get me investment. It has to be core to your thesis.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of narrowing in even on the individual employee and the responsibility there. I thought your comment was really good. So I'm going to kind of jump straight down to the meat of it there. We're seeing a huge influx of individual employee use versus company usage. And so one of the things in the report, specifically to talk about the replacement of jobs, it says, and I'm just going to quote it straight from the report here, research found limited layoffs from generative AI and only in industries that are already affected significantly by AI. There is no consensus among executives as to hiring levels over the next 3 to 5 years. So that isn't necessarily the sign that we thought that AI is going to replace everything. I mean,
Yeah.
frankly, I never thought it would replace everything. I thought our jobs would just transform. But I think that that's a really evident, I mean, the research is starting to show it, right? But I think the other thing to note is that the shadow AI economy, kind of in that there's employee usage and company usage. So companies generally are only showing about a 40% subscription for LLM, but 90% of employees are using LLMs, which means that your employees, whether or not you're giving them a solution, they're starting to pick up AI as everyday habits for their job. And I think that that's also something for small businesses and leaders to really note as you're looking to figure out, how can I transform my company, assist my employees, or even be a better solution for customers as you
Mhm.
think about the future of your own product or service.
Well, and I think, this is also an area, in my opinion, that the US education system really needs to get on board,
Mm.
because they've been very sort of just anti AI. And I was speaking with someone who works in a university system, and she said they've actually really been working with Claude a lot, and they're trying to figure out how to effectively use it in education. And I think, as parents, people need to realize that AI is not going away, and keeping your children sort of sheltered from it, or feeling like it's not something that they need to learn, or not something you need to learn, is not a great way to make sure they have a job. And and I think that's a key point. And this is not going to go away, and the
Mhm.
more that you understand how to leverage it appropriately, that's how you're going to be successful. The other piece there, if you don't have a policy or a process in place, people will make one and
Yes.
you might not like it. And we've talked about this on multiple episodes. So now is the time to think about, what should your process be? What should your policy be? What does that look like? This is the time. It's past time. And so, if you don't create one, it will be created for you.
Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, let's land the plane. So based on all of this, and again, you guys should go read it yourself. I thought the report was really interesting, even if it is more from enterprise. There's a lot of things that I could see trends in small businesses and startups, even as my own business. But my question is this for you, Katrina. What should leaders be doing right now about their approach to AI, or what should they keep in mind as they walk away from this?
Yeah, so I think there's so much you can be consuming right now. So I like to go to a lot of different talks. I like to hear what people are saying is working, what people are saying is not working. I don't think you should be wed to one model right now. So I hear tons of people talk about ChatGPT, but in reality, there are so many other options out there. In fact, one talk I went to said that Claude is rated much higher than ChatGPT when it comes to legal type review and things like that, right?
Yeah.
And so I think not being married to one model, like don't bet on one horse winning it all, because I don't think this is going to be a winner take all. I think that certain models are being used in specific instances and therefore are going to become smarter about specific topics and about specific things. I think the other piece is, and I think most people have taken their heads out of the sand, but I think you can't ignore this, right? This is happening. It's coming. Do you know what I did this week? I created an entire meal plan based off of food allergies, based off of local sales at the grocery stores around me, and based off of the foods that my family likes to eat and the foods that my family doesn't like to eat, and got an entire food plan spit out for me and the shopping list and which grocery stores to go to. So there's just so many things that can take that mental load sort of off of you, put it on your AI, right? Put it on your chatbot or your friend or whatever you're calling the person that you're texting behind the screen. And I'll leave you with, I still always say thank you and please, just because when it takes over the world, I want to be remembered as being friendly.
That's amazing. Also, I need your chatbot so that I can also do the meal planning. That
Yeah.
would be
I
so
mean, it's
helpful.
life changing. Yeah, that's like the one thing, the most like horrid question in my opinion is like, what's for dinner?
Ugh. I kind of love it as long as I don't have the pressure of it, right? But so yeah, so I'm gonna throw this out as my one like takeaway is that we need to remember the normal S curve for business growth. So as most business owners or longtime business people should be aware, you have a lot of up with sale, 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 and then you start to see this decline and it kind of goes into a divot before it like evens out for your business growth. And that's because in a lot of businesses, and by a lot, I mean almost all of them, you just have to get a big enough timeline. Your growth goes high, high, high. And at some point it does plateau. And so it looks like it dips down and then it kind of finds a nice medium. AI is going to do the same thing. We've seen this in lots of different technologies. Right now we're in that like high, high usage. Everyone loves it. We're having a big old grand time and we're going to see a plummet and we're going to see kind of a down low. And that's just fine. And it's really going to matter about the businesses that have a plan for actual problem solving AI and how you integrate it. And then it's going to plateau back up into that normal usage. So this is the area that I think small business owners and small businesses can, and leaders in these areas can really win by doubling down on the things that they know they've tested. We know this will make a difference if done right, to your point, transformative. And so we're not going to give up when it gets hard. We're going to steady the ship and just really keep going and making sure it's useful for customers. So that is our episode for today. Thank you so much for joining us on the Manage Chaos podcast. We would love it if you would join us on YouTube and give us a little subscribe button. We have big goals this year and we're trying to hit them. You can also, of course, follow or subscribe on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And we will talk to you on the next episode of the Manage Chaos podcast.